The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as Commander Jake Morrison was finishing his coffee. The blue hologram flickered to life above his desk, showing the symbol of the Galactic Defense Coalition. Jake had seen this symbol many times over the past 3 years, but it still made him feel small. Earth was just a tiny part of something much bigger now. "Commander Morrison," the alien voice spoke through the translator. "We have a request from Coalition High Command." Jake sat down his cup and straightened his uniform. 3 years ago, humanity had received their first invitation to join the galactic community. It had been exciting at first, but Jake quickly learned that most aliens saw humans as useful workers, not real soldiers. They liked human engineers and traders, but they laughed at human military power. The hologram continued. "We need human military instructors for our elite training academy on Nexus Prime. The request is for combat veterans who can teach unconventional warfare tactics to our officer candidates." Jake almost choked on his coffee. Military instructors? The Coalition had never asked for human military help before. They usually sent their own people to train Earth's forces, not the other way around. "Are you certain about this request?" Jake asked. "Yes, Commander. The Academy specifically requested humans. They want someone who can think differently about warfare." After the message ended, Jake sat back in his chair. This was strange. The Coalition had superior technology, ancient wisdom, and thousands of years of military experience. Why would they want to learn from humans? Jake walked to his window and looked out at the busy Earth Defense Corps' base. Human soldiers moved between buildings, some carrying weapons that looked primitive compared to Coalition technology. But these soldiers had something the aliens didn't understand yet. They had survived wars where rules meant nothing and honor got you killed. He thought about who to send. The Coalition wanted someone who could teach unconventional tactics. That meant someone who had fought in the messy, brutal conflicts that shaped human military thinking. Someone who understood that war was not about glory or honor, but about survival. The answer came to him immediately. Staff Sergeant Lisa Grant. Lisa was in the training yard when Jake found her. She was teaching a group of young soldiers how to use everyday objects as weapons. A coffee mug became a striking tool. A belt became a restraint. A simple pen became a pressure point weapon. "Grant," Jake called out, "I need to speak with you." Lisa dismissed her students and walked over. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the space around her. 2 tours in Afghanistan and 3 years fighting in the corporate wars had given her eyes that saw everything and trusted nothing. "What's the situation, sir?" she asked. Jake explained the Coalition's request. As he spoke, Lisa's expression changed from interest to confusion to something that might have been amusement. "They want me to teach aliens how to fight?" she asked. "They want you to teach their elite officers unconventional warfare tactics." Lisa laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Sir, these are species that have been fighting wars for thousands of years. They have weapons that can destroy planets. What could I possibly teach them?" "Maybe that's exactly the point," Jake said. "They fight with honor and rules. You fight to win." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. She watched the young soldiers practicing what she had just taught them. They were adapting, learning to see weapons where others saw ordinary objects. That was the human way. "When do I leave?" she asked. 2 weeks later, Lisa stood on the transport ship, looking out at Nexus Prime. The planet was beautiful in a way that Earth never was. Perfect cities rose from perfect landscapes. Everything was clean and organized and peaceful. The Academy was the most impressive building Lisa had ever seen. It was bigger than most Earth cities, with towers that reached into the clouds. Ships from dozens of different species landed and took off from its many platforms. Inside, Lisa met her students. They were not what she expected. Prince Zeth of the Kithara stood 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and skin like armor. His people were famous warriors who had conquered half their galaxy before joining the coalition. He looked at Lisa like she was an interesting but harmless pet. Commander Vex of the hegemony was smaller, but more intimidating. Her people had technology that made human computers look like stone tools. She studied Lisa with eyes that seemed to see through skin and bone. Captain Nira of the Eldari was the most unsettling. Her people were older than human civilization. They had been fighting wars when Earth was still covered in ice. She watched Lisa with the patient attention of someone who had seen everything the universe had to offer. "So," Prince Zeth said, his voice rumbling through the translator, "you are the human who will teach us about warfare?" Lisa looked at each of them in turn. They were bigger, stronger, smarter, and more experienced than her. They had technology she could barely understand, and military traditions that stretched back millennia. "Yes," she said simply. Commander Vex tilted her head. "What could a primitive species possibly teach us about combat?" Lisa smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in the mountains of Afghanistan when enemy fighters had asked her unit to surrender. It was the smile that said she knew something they didn't. "We'll find out," she said. The first class was scheduled for the next morning. Lisa spent the night reading about her student species and their military traditions. The Kithara believed in honor and direct combat. The hegemony relied on superior technology and overwhelming force. The Eldari used ancient wisdom and perfect strategy. All of them followed rules. All of them fought fair. All of them would lose to an enemy who understood that war was not a game. Lisa closed her files and looked out at the alien stars. Tomorrow, she would begin teaching the galaxy's finest military minds something new. She would teach them that humans didn't fight to be honorable, or fair, or impressive. Humans fought to survive. And that made all the difference. Lisa's first class was a disaster. She stood in front of the most advanced military classroom she had ever seen, watching her alien students barely hide their amusement. "Today we will discuss small unit tactics," she began, calling up a holographic display. "How to defeat a superior enemy using limited resources." Prince Zeth leaned back in his chair, which groaned under his massive weight. "Instructor Grant, why would we avoid direct confrontation? The Kithara have never retreated from battle." Commander Vex nodded her agreement. "Our technology allows us to engage any enemy with superior firepower. Hiding and running seems cowardly." Captain Nira said nothing, but her ancient eyes held the same dismissive look Lisa had seen on the faces of officers who thought they knew everything. Lisa tried to explain guerrilla warfare principles, but her students interrupted with questions that missed the point entirely. They wanted to know about honor codes and proper engagement protocols. They asked about technology requirements and casualty ratios. They completely ignored the core concept of asymmetric warfare. "Perhaps," Prince Zeth said after Lisa finished her presentation, "human tactics work for humans because you lack the strength for real combat." The classroom fell silent. Lisa felt the familiar heat rise in her chest, the same anger she had felt when politicians back home called soldiers cowards for using cover. "You think strength is everything?" she asked quietly. "Strength and honor," Prince Zeth replied. "This is the foundation of all warfare." Lisa looked at her students for a long moment. They were confident, superior, and completely wrong. She had seen this attitude before in the eyes of enemy commanders who thought their superior numbers and equipment guaranteed victory. "I want to run a practical exercise," she said. Commander Vex raised what might have been an eyebrow. "What kind of exercise?" "A war game simulation, your way against my way." The 3 alien officers exchanged glances. Captain Nira spoke for the first time. "You wish to challenge us? A single human against 3 coalition officers? I wish to demonstrate something, Lisa said. The Academy's holographic training grounds can simulate any scenario. I propose defending a space station against a superior enemy force. Prince Zeth's forearms crossed in what Lisa had learned was aggressive posture. You believe you can defeat us in simulation? I believe I can show you something new. The war game was scheduled for the next day. Word spread quickly through the Academy. Other instructors requested permission to observe. Senior Coalition officers arrived to watch the human make a fool of herself. Lisa spent the night studying the simulation parameters. The scenario was simple. Defend Station Alpha 7 against an enemy fleet 3 times larger than the defending force. Standard Coalition doctrine called for forming a defensive perimeter and fighting with honor until reinforcements arrived. Lisa had other plans. The simulation began at 800 hours. Lisa's team consisted of herself and 3 junior human officers who had arrived that morning. Her students commanded a force of 12 alien officers, all eager to demonstrate their superiority. The enemy fleet approached exactly as Lisa expected. Prince Zeth led the assault with typical Cathara directness, forming his ships into a spear formation designed to punch through defensive lines. Commander Vex positioned her technologically superior vessels to provide covering fire. Captain Nira held her ancient but deadly ships in reserve, ready to exploit any weakness. Lisa's first move confused everyone. Instead of forming a defensive line, she scattered her ships and withdrew from the station. The human is retreating, Prince Zeth announced over the communication channel. Victory is ours. But Lisa was not retreating. She was preparing as the enemy fleet closed on the station. Lisa's scattered ships began their real work. They had spent the night disguising themselves as civilian vessels, maintenance craft, and supply ships. Now they moved through the enemy formation like ghosts. The first explosion came from inside Prince Zeth's flagship. A supply ship had docked for emergency repairs and detonated its cargo hold. The massive Cathara vessel lost main power and began to drift. The second attack targeted Commander Vex's communication hub. A maintenance crew had been working on the station's communication array. When Vex's ships tried to coordinate their assault, they found their own communication systems turned against them, broadcasting false orders and jamming signals. Captain Nira's ancient wisdom meant nothing when her ship's sensors were fed false information by the station's supposedly damaged systems. Her perfectly planned maneuvers became chaotic as her crews tried to target enemies that didn't exist, while ignoring real threats that appeared to be friendly vessels. Within 2 hours, Lisa's numerically inferior force had eliminated the superior enemy fleet. She had used no advanced technology, no superior firepower, and no ancient wisdom. She had simply refused to fight the way her enemies expected. The simulation ended in stunned silence. The observing officers stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. How? Commander Vex finally asked. Your ships were inferior in every way. Lisa walked to the holographic display and pointed at the destroyed enemy fleet. You fought with honor. You followed rules. You did exactly what your training taught you to do. And you cheated, Prince Zeth said, but his voice lacked conviction. I adapted, Lisa replied. I used your expectations against you. I made you see what you wanted to see, while I did what needed to be done. Captain Nira stood slowly from her chair. The maintenance workers who sabotaged our ships, they were your people? They were soldiers doing their job, Lisa said. In human warfare, every civilian is a potential combatant. Every piece of equipment is a potential weapon. Every expectation is a weakness to exploit. The room was quiet except for the hum of the holographic projectors. Lisa could see her students processing what they had experienced. Their confidence was shaken, but their understanding had not yet changed. This is not how warfare is conducted, Prince Zeth said. There are rules, protocols, codes of honor. Those rules exist because your enemies follow them too, Lisa explained. What happens when you face an enemy who doesn't care about your rules? Commander Vex was studying the tactical replay, her advanced mind analyzing every move. You used psychological manipulation. You made us believe we were winning while you were destroying us. I made you believe what you wanted to believe, Lisa corrected. You expected me to fight like a coalition officer, so I fought like a human. The next few days were different. Lisa's students still argued with her tactics, but now they asked different questions. They wanted to know how she had predicted their movements. They asked about the psychology of deception and the use of civilian resources in military operations. Other instructors began visiting Lisa's classes. Word of the simulation had spread throughout the academy, and officers from across coalition space wanted to understand what they had. Witness. Lisa used their curiosity to introduce concepts that would have been rejected before. She explained how human military doctrine assumed that enemies would use any advantage available. She described how human soldiers were trained to think like their opponents, to predict their actions, and to exploit their weaknesses. War is not about strength or honor, she told her growing audience. War is about survival, and survival requires you to use every tool, every advantage, every opportunity that presents itself. Prince Zeth raised one of his 4 hands. What if these tools are considered dishonorable by your people? Lisa thought of the mountains of Afghanistan, where honor got good soldiers killed. She thought of the corporate wars, where following rules meant losing everything. Dead soldiers have no honor, she said simply, and dead soldiers cannot protect the people they serve. The academy was changing. Officers who had studied warfare for decades were learning to question their assumptions. They were beginning to understand that human military success came not from superior technology or physical strength, but from a willingness to adapt, to innovate, and to do whatever was necessary to achieve victory. Lisa's revolution had begun. After the war game simulation, Lisa knew her students needed to understand something deeper. They were beginning to question their assumptions about warfare, but they still didn't understand why humans fought so differently. She decided to dedicate an entire week to human military history. Today we begin a journey through time, Lisa announced to her expanded class. More officers had joined after hearing about the simulation. The classroom was now filled with representatives from a dozen different species, all eager to understand human warfare. We will explore how humans have always adapted to overcome superior enemies through innovation and determination. She began with ancient conflicts. The holographic display showed the narrow pass at Thermopylae, where 300 Spartan warriors had held off a massive Persian army. The Persians had superior numbers, better equipment, and more resources, Lisa explained. But the Spartans chose the battlefield. They used the terrain to neutralize the Persian advantage. Prince Zeph leaned forward. This is honorable combat. Warriors facing warriors in direct battle. Yes, but notice the strategy, Lisa replied. The Spartans didn't meet the Persians in open battle where they would be overwhelmed. They chose a place where numbers meant nothing. They turned the enemy's strength into weakness. Commander Vex studied the tactical display. The Persians could have simply waited. They had supply lines and reinforcements. They could have, Lisa agreed. But the Spartans understood Persian psychology. They knew their enemy would not wait. They used the enemy's impatience and pride against them. Captain Nera spoke quietly. You are saying that understanding your enemy's mind is as important as understanding their weapons? More important, Lisa said. Weapons can be replaced. Psychology is harder to change. The next day, Lisa showed them the American Revolution. The holographic display recreated the forests of colonial America, where ragtag militia fought the most powerful military in the world. The British had professional soldiers, naval superiority, and vast resources, Lisa explained. The colonists had farmers with hunting rifles. Then how did the colonists win? Asked a young officer from the Centauri Federation. Lisa smiled. They changed the rules of engagement. Instead of fighting like Europeans, they fought like Americans. They used hit-and-run tactics, attacked supply lines, and turned every civilian into a potential combatant. The display showed British soldiers marching in formation, while colonial fighters fired from behind trees and fences. The red-coated troops looked brave and disciplined, but they were dying. The British expected honorable warfare, Lisa continued. They expected armies to meet in open fields and fight according to established rules. The colonists gave them something else entirely. Prince Zeth was disturbed. The colonists attacked from hiding. They targeted supply trains and messengers. This is not warrior behavior. No, Lisa agreed. It's survivor behavior. The colonists weren't trying to be honorable. They were trying to be free. As the week progressed, Lisa introduced more human conflicts. She showed them the trenches of World War I, where technology had made traditional warfare impossible. She explained how soldiers adapted to survive in conditions that would have horrified earlier generations. Notice how humans changed their tactics when the old methods failed, she said. They didn't honor the cavalry charge when machine guns made it suicide. They adapted. The Vietnam War was particularly disturbing to her alien students. The display showed dense jungle where high-tech American forces fought an enemy that seemed to appear and disappear at will. The Americans had superior technology, air support, and more soldiers, Lisa explained. But they were fighting an enemy that understood the terrain and the local population. Commander Vex analyzed the tactical data. The Vietnamese used the civilian population as cover. They turned villages into fortresses and supply bases. They turned an entire nation into a weapon, Lisa corrected. Every farmer was a potential intelligence source. Every village was a potential base. Every civilian was a potential combatant. Captain Nira looked uncomfortable. This makes war unlimited. If civilians are combatants, then there are no safe places, no non-combatants. That's exactly right, Lisa said. In human warfare, the distinction between soldier and civilian can disappear. When survival is at stake, everyone fights. The implications horrified her students. Their species had clear rules about civilian populations, protected zones, and non-combatants. The idea that humans would weaponize their entire society was deeply disturbing. What about honor? Prince Zeph asked. What about protecting the innocent? Lisa's expression grew serious. We protect the innocent by winning. Dead soldiers cannot protect anyone. Lost wars do not preserve honor. She showed them World War II, and the classroom fell silent. The display showed the massive scale of human conflict, where entire nations devoted themselves to total warfare. Look at this, Lisa said, highlighting production figures. Civilians worked in factories building weapons. Children collected scrap metal. Scientists developed new technologies. The entire human population became part of the war effort. The aliens watched in fascination and horror as Lisa explained strategic bombing, submarine warfare, and the development of nuclear weapons. They saw how humans had weaponized everything from propaganda to weather patterns. The Americans dropped atomic bombs on cities, Commander Vex said quietly. They killed civilians to end the war faster. Yes, Lisa said. They made a calculation that killing 200,000 people would save millions of lives by ending the war quickly. Right or wrong, it was a decision based on results, not honor. Captain Nira stood up abruptly. This is monstrous. No civilized species would make such calculations. No, Lisa agreed. But humans aren't civilized when their survival is threatened. We become very practical very quickly. The week continued with more recent conflicts. Lisa showed them the corporate wars, where human corporations had fought with economic weapons, information warfare, and targeted assassinations. Notice how the battlefield expanded, she explained. Military targets, economic infrastructure, information networks, even individual leaders became legitimate targets. You turned everything into a weapon, Prince Seth said. Trade routes, communication systems, even ideas and information. Because everything can be a weapon, Lisa replied. The only question is whether you're willing to use it. By the end of the week, Lisa's students were quiet and thoughtful. They had seen human warfare evolve from primitive but effective tactics to sophisticated systems that could weaponize entire civilizations. I have a question, Commander Vex said during the final class. Why do humans fight this way? Other species follow rules, maintain honor, protect civilians. Why are humans different? Lisa considered the question carefully. Because we had to. B. Earth is a dangerous place. We evolved fighting each other and our environment. We learned that survival requires adaptation, that honor is a luxury for those who can afford it. But you are part of the coalition now, Captain Nira said. You have allies, technology, safety. Why maintain these brutal methods? Lisa looked at each of her students. Because we've learned that peace is temporary. Safety is an illusion. Somewhere in the galaxy, there's always someone who wants to take what you have. And when they come, you need to be ready to do whatever it takes to stop them. The classroom was silent for a long moment. Finally, Prince Seth spoke. You are saying that humans are always prepared for war, even during peace? Especially during peace, Lisa replied. That's when your enemies are preparing too. As the week ended, Lisa could see that her students had changed. They no longer looked at human tactics as primitive or dishonorable. They were beginning to understand that human warfare was not about savagery, but about effectiveness. They were learning that sometimes survival required abandoning the comfortable rules that civilized societies preferred. They were discovering that in the darkest moments, the willingness to adapt and overcome could mean the difference between victory and extinction. The lesson was almost complete. Soon, they would have a chance to apply what they had learned in the real world. The emergency transmission arrived at 0300 hours, waking Lisa from the deepest sleep she had enjoyed in months. The holographic display showed Admiral Chun of the Hegemony, his usually calm face tight with worry. Instructor Grant, we have a situation. The Coalition's Outer Rim territories are under attack by an unknown enemy force. Their tactics are unlike anything we have encountered. Lisa sat up in her bed, instantly alert. What kind of tactics? They appear from nowhere, strike hard, and disappear before our forces can respond. They target supply convoys, communication, relays, and isolated outposts. Our traditional defensive formations are useless against them. The display showed tactical reports from the last 6 attacks. Lisa studied the patterns, her mind automatically analyzing the enemy's methods. It was like looking at a textbook example of guerrilla warfare. They're raiders, she said. Nomadic fighters who have perfected hit-and-run tactics. Admiral Chun nodded grimly. Coalition High Command has requested that you accompany Task Force Omega to the battle zone as a tactical advisor. I must admit, I was reluctant to accept. Advice from a human, but our current strategies have proven completely ineffective. Lisa was already getting dressed. When do we leave? Within the hour. Your students Prince Zeth, Commander Vex, and Captain Nira have volunteered to join the mission. They claim you have taught them valuable lessons about unconventional warfare. The journey to the Outer Rim took 3 days. Lisa used the time to study every report, every sensor reading, every piece of intelligence about the enemy. They called. themselves the Devourers, and they had been raiding Coalition space for 2 months. "Look at this pattern," Lisa said, showing her analysis to the task force commanders. They hit supply convoys every 7 days, but never on the same route twice. They attack communication relays during shift changes when security is minimal. They target isolated outposts just before supply runs arrive. Admiral Chun studied the data. "How do they know our schedules?" "Our supply routes are classified." "They're watching you," Lisa replied. "They study your patterns, learn your habits, then use that knowledge against you." Classic intelligence gathering. Prince Zeth, who had been silent during the briefing, finally spoke. "How do we fight an enemy we cannot find?" Lisa smiled. It was the same question human soldiers had asked for centuries. "We don't find them. We make them come to us." The task force arrived at the battle zone to find chaos. 3 coalition fleets were spread across the system, trying to protect dozens of targets simultaneously. They were reactive, always 1 step behind the enemy. "This is exactly what the Devourers want," Lisa explained to Admiral Chun. "You're spread thin, trying to defend everything. They can pick and choose their targets." "What do you suggest?" the Admiral asked. "We stop trying to defend everything and start trying to win something," Lisa replied. "We use their tactics against them." Lisa's plan was simple, but required the coalition officers to think like humans. Instead of trying to protect all their assets, they would use some of them as bait. "We identify the most tempting targets," she explained. "Supply convoys with valuable cargo, communication relays with minimal security, outposts with skeleton crews. But instead of actually making them vulnerable, we make them appear vulnerable." Commander Vex understood immediately. "We disguise our warships as supply vessels and position them along the convoy routes." "Exactly. And we use our real supply ships to carry sensor packages that will track the enemy back to their base." Captain Nira looked troubled. "This requires deception. We would be lying to our own people about security arrangements." "We would be adapting to survive," Lisa corrected. "The Devourers are winning because they understand something you don't. In warfare, appearance is often more important than reality." The plan took 2 weeks to implement. Lisa worked with her former students to design the deception operation. They disguised 3 heavy cruisers as cargo haulers, complete with false transponder codes and staged damage to make them appear vulnerable. The bait convoy was scheduled to carry medical supplies to a frontier colony. The Devourers had hit similar convoys twice before, making it an irresistible target. "Remember," Lisa told the strike team commanders, "they will come fast and hard, expecting minimal resistance. Let them get close before revealing your true nature." The attack came exactly as Lisa predicted. The Devourers dropped out of hyperspace in a coordinated assault, their sleek ships moving like wolves toward what they thought was helpless prey. The lead raider ship closed on the largest cargo hauler and extended boarding tubes. Lisa watched from the command ship as the enemy made their fatal mistake. "Now," she said quietly. The disguised cruiser dropped its false transponder and powered up its weapons. The other 2 ships did the same, revealing themselves as fully armed coalition warships. The Devourers found themselves trapped in a perfect ambush, but Lisa wasn't finished. As the enemy ships tried to escape, they triggered the second part of her plan. The real cargo ships, positioned throughout the system, activated their hidden sensor arrays and began tracking the raiders' retreat. "They're going to run," Lisa explained to Admiral Chun. "But this time, we're going to follow them." Home, the battle was decisive. For the first time in the conflict, coalition forces achieved total victory against the Devourers. More importantly, they had located the enemy's main base. "How did you know they would attack the convoy?" Prince Zeth asked after the battle. "Because I understand what they are," Lisa replied. "They're not warriors fighting for honor. They're not soldiers following orders. They're predators looking for easy prey. Change the nature of the prey, and you change the outcome of the hunt. The intelligence gathered from the tracking operation revealed that the Devourers were not just raiders, but advanced scouts for a much larger force. They had been testing coalition defenses, learning weaknesses, preparing for a full-scale invasion. There are hundreds of their ships massed just outside our sensor range, Commander Vex reported. They've been planning this for months. Lisa studied the enemy fleet composition. They're nomads, but they're organized. They have supply ships command, vessels, even civilian populations. This isn't just a raiding party. It's a nation. Admiral Chun looked grim. How do we fight an entire nomadic civilization? The same way humans have always fought superior enemies, Lisa replied. We use their strengths against them. They're mobile, but that makes them dependent on their supply lines. They're unified, but that makes them vulnerable to disruption. They're confident, but that makes them predictable. The coalition's counterattack was unlike anything they had ever attempted. Instead of meeting the enemy fleet in traditional battle, they used human tactics to attack the Devourers' weaknesses. Small strike teams hit fuel depots and supply convoys. Information warfare specialists disrupted their communication networks. Psychological operations spread confusion and distrust among the enemy ranks. You're destroying their ability to fight without actually fighting them, Captain Nira observed. We're making them fight us on our terms instead of theirs, Lisa corrected. When the final battle comes, they'll be weakened, confused, and desperate. That's when traditional coalition tactics will be most effective. The campaign lasted 6 weeks. When it ended, the Devourer fleet was scattered and broken. Their advanced scouts had been captured or destroyed. Their supply network was in ruins. We won, Admiral Chun said, but he sounded surprised by his own words. You adapted, Lisa replied. You learned to think like your enemy and then think one step ahead of them. The victory sent shockwaves through coalition space. For the first time, they had defeated an enemy using tactics that their own military academies had never taught. Word of Lisa's role in the victory spread quickly. The human instructor who had seemed so out of place at the elite academy was now being discussed in the highest circles of coalition command. What happens now? Prince Zeph asked as the task force prepared to return to Nexus Prime. Lisa looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the darkness, other enemies were watching and learning. Now we prepare for the next threat, because there's always a next threat. The real test of human military doctrine was just beginning. But Lisa was confident that her students had learned the most important lesson of all. In warfare, the willingness to adapt was the ultimate weapon. 6 months after the Devourer campaign, Lisa stood in her new office, overlooking the expanded training facilities at Nexus Prime Academy. The title on her door, Director of Advanced Tactical Studies, but everyone simply called her the Instructor. The academy had changed dramatically since her arrival. New buildings housed specialized training centers for unconventional warfare, psychological operations, and adaptive strategy. Students from across coalition space competed for admission to Lisa's program. The morning briefing is ready, Director, Captain Tony Rodriguez said as he entered her office. The former Special Forces operator had arrived 3 months earlier as part of Lisa's expanding team of human instructors. What's the current enrollment? Lisa asked, still getting used to the administrative side of her new position. 237 students from 46 different species, Tony replied. We have a waiting list of over 1,000 applicants. Lisa shook her head in amazement. When she first arrived, the academy had barely tolerated her presence. Now, officers who had fought wars for centuries were begging to learn from humans. The morning briefing was held in the new amphitheater, a circular room designed to accommodate the various physiologies of coalition species. Lisa looked out at the sea of faces, some familiar, many new. Today marks the beginning of Advanced Tactical Studies Session 7, she announced. For those joining us for the first time, this program will challenge everything you think you know about warfare. In the front row sat her original students, now serving as assistant instructors. Prince Zeph had become an expert in psychological warfare, using his understanding of honor-based cultures to predict enemy behavior. Commander Vex specialized in information warfare, turning her technological expertise toward disrupting enemy communications. Captain Nira taught strategic deception, her ancient wisdom now combined with human cunning. The first lesson, Lisa continued, is that warfare is not about weapons or technology. It is about minds, the side that can think differently, adapt faster, and surprise their enemy will win regardless of other factors. A young officer from the Rigel system raised her hand. Director Grant, my species has superior physical capabilities and advanced weapons. Why should we adopt human tactics? Lisa smiled. It was the same question she had faced a year ago, but now she had a different answer. Because somewhere in the galaxy, there is an enemy studying your superior physical capabilities and advanced weapons. They are learning your strengths so they can find ways to neutralize them. The question is, are you learning to think like them? The lecture hall fell silent. Lisa had their attention. Human tactics are not about being weak or primitive, she continued. They are about being adaptable. We assume our enemies will be smarter, stronger, and better equipped than we are. Then we plan accordingly. After the briefing, Lisa walked through the training facilities. In one room, students practiced using civilian equipment as weapons. In another, they learned to analyze enemy psychology and predict behavior patterns. A third group studied the history of asymmetric warfare across dozens of species. The Coalition's entire approach to military education is changing, Major Susan Clark observed. The intelligence specialist had joined Lisa's team to develop new courses in information warfare and strategic deception. It needed to change, Lisa replied. The old way of thinking was getting good soldiers killed. They paused at an observation window overlooking the main training ground. Below, mixed teams of Coalition officers were conducting war games that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Cathara warriors worked alongside hegemony technicians to sabotage enemy supply lines. Eldari strategists coordinated with human advisors to plan deception operations. Look at that, Susan pointed to a group of students. 6 months ago, those species barely spoke to each other. Now they're planning joint operations that combine their unique strengths. Lisa watched as a team of students successfully completed a simulation that required them to defeat a superior enemy force using only improvised weapons and psychological warfare. The victory celebration included species that had been enemies for millennia before joining the Coalition. That's the real revolution, Lisa said. Not just teaching new tactics, but teaching different species to think together, to combine their abilities in ways that surprise their enemies. The afternoon brought a priority message from Coalition High Command. Lisa read it twice before calling an emergency meeting of her senior staff. What's the situation? Tony asked as the team assembled in Lisa's office. Intelligence reports indicate that the Devourers were not working alone, Lisa explained. They were advanced scouts for something called the Crimson Imperium, an ancient enemy of the Coalition that was thought destroyed 3,000 years ago. Susan pulled up tactical displays showing the latest intelligence reports. They've been hiding in dark space, rebuilding their forces, and studying Coalition military doctrine. The Devourer raids were just reconnaissance missions. How large is this Crimson Imperium? Prince Zeph asked. Even after months of human military training, he still thought in terms of honorable combat between equals. Unknown, Lisa replied. But intelligence suggests they have technology that makes current coalition weapons look primitive. They've had 3 millennia to prepare for their return. Commander Vex was analyzing the technical data. Their ships use energy sources we don't recognize. Their weapons can apparently destroy planets. By all conventional measures, they are unstoppable. Captain Nera spoke quietly. My people remember the first war with the Crimson Imperium. They were defeated only through the sacrifice of entire star systems. Billions died to stop them. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This was not another raiding force or territorial dispute. This was an existential threat to the entire coalition. So what do we do? Tony asked. Lisa looked at each of her colleagues. They represented the best military minds in coalition space, trained in both traditional warfare and human tactics. If anyone could find a solution, it would be them. We do what humans always do when facing a superior enemy, she said. We refuse to fight on their terms. Over the next week, Lisa's team developed a comprehensive strategy that combined everything they had learned about human warfare with the unique capabilities of coalition species. The plan was radical, dangerous, and completely unlike anything attempted in galactic history. We can't match their technology or firepower, Lisa explained to a gathering of coalition commanders. But we can do something they won't expect. We can turn their strengths into weaknesses. The strategy required unprecedented cooperation between coalition worlds. Instead of meeting the Crimson Imperium in traditional fleet battles, they would use the entire galaxy as a weapon. Trade routes would become supply lines for resistance movements. Civilian populations would provide intelligence and support for guerrilla operations. Even peaceful worlds would contribute by developing new technologies and strategies. You're proposing to militarize the entire coalition, Admiral Chun observed. I'm proposing to survive, Lisa replied. The Crimson Imperium expects to face the same coalition that fought them before. We're going to give them something completely different. The Academy became the center of a galaxy-wide training program. Officers from every coalition world came to learn human tactics and adapt them to their own species' capabilities. Lisa's original students became traveling instructors, spreading the new military doctrine across thousands of worlds. It's working, Tony reported 6 months later. Coalition forces are thinking differently, fighting differently, winning differently. The old rigid command structures are being replaced by adaptive networks that can respond to any threat. Lisa stood at her window, watching the latest class of graduates prepare to return to their home worlds. They would carry with them not just new tactics, but a new way of thinking about warfare and survival. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Lisa activated the display to find Commander Jake Morrison calling from Earth. Congratulations, Director Grant, he said with a smile. I hear you've started a revolution. I just taught them what we already knew, Lisa replied. That survival requires adaptation, and adaptation requires the courage to change. The Crimson Imperium has been spotted at the edge of coalition space, Jake continued. Their advance fleet is massive. When will you be ready? Lisa looked out at the training grounds where officers from dozens of species were learning to think like humans, to fight like humans, to survive like humans. We're ready now, she said. But more importantly, when they arrive, they'll find that the galaxy they left behind no longer exists. They'll be fighting an enemy that didn't exist 3,000 years ago. And what enemy is that? Lisa smiled. An enemy that learned from humanity. An enemy that refuses to fight fair, refuses to follow rules, and refuses to lose. The final test was coming. The galaxy's most ancient enemy was returning with technology beyond imagination and a thirst for revenge. But they would find a coalition transformed by human military doctrine, a civilization that had learned the most important lesson of warfare. In the end, it was not about strength or technology or ancient wisdom. It was about the willingness to adapt, to change, to do whatever was necessary to survive. The Crimson Imperium had spent 3 millennia preppa,